Let me start with this. The question that I'm asking has been presented for years and years, right? Why do we not see more women in the executive suite, at the board level, and in senior leadership roles? And what's interesting about this question is it's been answered in many different ways over many, many years. And some of that data suggests that, in fact, having women in these roles is incredibly advantageous to organizations. It drives better profit, it drives better performance, it creates a slightly different culture, the way that organizations operate. And so the net is that adding more females in the executive levels of organizations is ultimately beneficial. And what we've seen in the last many years are these incremental increases at that very senior level. And these are celebrated widely and loudly. And in some respects, maybe they should be. Every success drives us towards the goal that we're seeking, which is greater equity in the senior roles. It's greater representation for women at the executive level. But the challenge I have with that is that every small step we take is just that. It's a small step. And we have to take these steps, absolutely. And if we stop being resilient and we stop pushing to see that change happen, it won't happen. But I think we have to look at the numbers and take a really hard look at them to say, is it good enough? Is what we're doing achieving what we need it to? And if it's not, which I would argue that it's not, what are we doing to change that? How can we all actively change the way that we think about supporting women, getting women into those senior roles? I would argue this is applicable across many aspects of diversity, but for this particular topic, I really want to focus on women. That's data that's been studied for a long time. It's metrics that we have. And when you look at this, I'm going to share my screen now. When you look at this information and sit with it for a minute, it should give us pause for thought. This data tells us that we have seen some increases in gender representation in the Fortune 500, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. It's been tracked for many years. We go back to 2002. In 2002, there were 7 women who were CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, just 7. And over the years, we have seen incremental increases. Now, of course, this is fluid. The same people who are in the positions at 2002 are not the same ones as are there in 2022, of course. But the overall numbers, we've seen incremental changes. In 2021, in fact, we saw a world-breaking record of 41 female CEOs in the Fortune 500. Astonishing and to be celebrated. And then we saw a very significant leap, relatively speaking, into 2022, where now, today, as of March 2022, we have 71 female CEOs in the Fortune 500, 71. So lots of numbers to sit with here for a second. 71 women out of 500 potential roles. So 429 men, 71 women. Think on that for a second. Then let's maybe pull the data back. So if we look between 2002 and 2022, and we take an average, let's say, of how many new female CEOs are being appointed on average per year, 3.2 per year. Now that's skewed, obviously. 2022 to 2021, we saw a bump. But even at this pace of change, even with the increase that we've seen in 2022, we are still years and years and years away from equity in terms of female representation in the Fortune 500, let alone having more women in those seats of power. But this is just one view. This is the Fortune 500 CEOs. What if we take a look at another perspective? Let's take a look at the S&P 1500. So this data I found absolutely fascinating. Say hello to John. Johns represent 5.3% of all CEOs in the S&P 1500. Just people named John. Who do you think is next? Thoughtful looking young man. David. There are 4.5% of the S&P 1500 named David. Johns and Davids make up nearly 10% of the entire S&P 1500. And then all women, every single female in the S&P 1500 from A to Z represents 4.1% of the entire population. Hot on their heels, don't forget Robert, he's down at 3.9. Again, we'll pause on that, think on that for a second. There are more Johns and Davids in senior executive leadership roles than there are the entire population of women. Let's step back maybe. Let's take a look at smaller organizations. So let's take a look at what's driving the future, driving innovation, driving R&D, bringing new ideas to life. It's the entrepreneurs, it's the startups, it's that venture fund, it's that PE fund that are providing wealth to new ideas that are shaping our future. Last year, there was $329.9 billion invested from VC funds. That's a huge number. Anybody have a guess? If I was in the room, anybody have a guess at how much of that was invested in female founders? 50% maybe? 25%? Show of hands. 10%? 5%? 2% of that $329.9 billion was invested in female-founded organizations. Now, there is a lot of literature on why that is. Venture funds like aggressive plans. They like plans that will see a close. They like the way that men operate in these businesses. And I just don't think that that is true. I think that we are seeing patterns of behavior which are skewed to historic ways of doing things. And I think that the way women and the way that we're approaching these things is allowing that to continue.